Hope everyone's doing well. This is Cloud Chief, and in today's video, I wanted to talk about Apex parties. At this point in the game, Apex parties are the closest thing you're going to get to an old school XP party. You pretty much join up with a group, and then, you have someone pull the mob, and then you kill the mob, and the whole point is to get XP as fast as possible. Of course, since this is item level 119, as opposed to you trying to level up to max, it's clearly going to be at a much faster pace than what old school XP parties were. The reason it's called Apex, if you're not aware, is because of the mob type. There are mobs called Apex whatever, like Apex Bats, Apex Crabs, so on and so forth. And there are all kinds of different Apex mobs all over the place in all the different gate zones and even in like outer Rakazna. To my understanding, they are only in the Adelan zones. The main point of an Apex party is to just literally get as much CP in as fast as possible. If you get a really good Apex party, it can definitely be some of the top end CP per hour you can get just across the board. You can do Eshin AoE parties that can oftentimes be a little better, but not always. I've definitely had one AoE party be, top end and then get in a really good Apex party, and then they actually are top end also and getting like close to the same amount of CP per hour. But just for a general overview, most of the time AoE parties are going to yield better CP. While these mobs are high level and meant to be taken as a party, you can definitely take them solo if you are well geared and have some skill. However, you're going to get the maximum amount of CP per hour by making sure that you team up with a group and are well coordinated. So now I want to take a minute and touch on camps. While pretty much any of the gates in like outer Rakazna would work for an Apex party, all you would have to do is find the mobs. The vast majority of people tend to really go to Doe gates. The next place off of that I'd say would probably be outer Rakazna, with then also it probably followed by Mo gates. However, feel free to do your own experimentation and try and find your own camp. I wouldn't be surprised if there's actually a really good camp fighting easy type of mobs that, no one really uses. So don't be afraid to go out there and explore and actually, try and find your own place. I'm going to talk about party setups, and I'm going to talk about the two main conventional types for party setups used for Apex parties. But again, feel free to come up with your own setup and feel free to, be creative on this. So the first party type that I'll touch on is Magic Burst types. So the main point of this party is to have two people set up a skill chain and then have essentially three people magic bursting with one person, there as the healer and support. And basically you blow up mobs per skill chain of magic burst as long as everyone's hitting. The typical setup for a magic burst party is going to consist of a DD. Typically you're going to be best off with, say, like either a war, a blue, or a paladin. Anyway, someone who can consistently hold hate and mitigate damage, but like pretty much any DD job can fill in this role. And their job is to open darkness. Then typically you're going to have a Corsair, but you could have another DD fill in this spot. But of course, Corsair is nice for multiple reasons. One, Corsair role, and two, people like lead and salute closing. And especially since you're in a Magic Burst party, you're typically going to have a Geo there. That's going to be boosting your, magic attack and lowering the enemy's magic defense. Lead and Salute can do a ton of damage to close darkness. You then have all your mages just magic burst darkness, and you're good to go. And that should be taking out the mob as long as everyone is decently well geared. You can, of course, skill chain light, but the big reason to skill chain dark, especially if you're going to Doe gates, is that way you can fight crabs, and then you can Asper the crabs. Especially if you Asper a magic burst, as long as you have decent magic accuracy, you can typically fill up your entire MP pool off of one Asper. And then from there, like I said, you would just want a support job, to someone to heal, although Scholar can typically do really well if they actually have some decent regen gear. They can just put up regen 5 on the whole party, and if you have a long duration, you can essentially just keep the party healed that way with minimum cures and then focus on nuking with the rest of the party. And then, of course, like I said, a Geo, which can also help nuke, but you want to definitely be, boosting that magic attack and lowering the magic defense on the mobs. And then just having, nukers, black mages, red mages, scholars, anyone who's got, decent magic burst gear to hit those magic bursts to get those high numbers. They're going to do a good job at, knocking down these mobs. Like, I've definitely been in parties where we could be doing skill chains every 5 seconds back to back, and yet you do a skill chain and then the mob's dead off of the magic burst. So now let's move on to Mailee Parties. These are typically more going to be a bunch of high-end melees with, say, a bard and a Geo in the party. Typically, you'd want like 3 high-end DDs, and then throw in a healer, a Geo, and a bard. The Geo and bard are going to be doing your typical buffing things. Obviously, the healer's just going to be healing, and then your DDs are going to try and bounce hate, or one of them will try and tank, depending on the job. And then typically, you guys are just going to TP, and then weapon skill. If you guys are really good, you can try and coordinate skill chains, which would do really good damage, especially if you have someone who happens to have an Aeonic in the party. You can then be getting, umbrals and radiances off, which can just be really good damage. As for mob types, if you're doing magic bursts, like I said, you're typically going to have people on crabs, mainly so that way the mages can Asper and get their MP back. If you're doing melees, you want to typically go up against something that isn't quite as physically tough as like crabs, so they're not putting up all these defensive moves. Bats are typically really good, or just going to Mogates fighting raptors and other type of mobs. Those are actually really good for melee parties because they're just going to be squishier and go down faster. And that pretty much sums up Apex parties in a nutshell. Like I said, this is definitely a good guide to refer to if you're just getting off the ground and never done one. It'll give you the rundown. But like anything else in this game, feel free to, venture off and try your own thing. You definitely don't have to follow this because this has mainly been just laid out as, cookie cutter setups that the vast majority of, the servers are actually doing. They're, just trying to follow the main meta, and this is kind of more explaining it. But definitely feel free to break away from that and be experimental and try your own things. You definitely can be surprised with the results that you get. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you got some value out of it, and may you have success in all you do.